around age 14, I went on a trip with my dad and my grandfather, and we were supposed to go camping. But they didn't take me camping. They brought me to a boarding school called Hepzibah House. And once I was inside, we sat down for a meeting with the pastor at the time, and I was told that I was going to be locked up there for the next 15 months. So when we got to Hepzibah House, I was taken in a room, and I don't really remember what happened to my grandfather at this point. I think he left the building and went to wait outside or something, because I don't really remember him being around. But it was my father and me and Pastor Williams. And at that point, he started going through the rules of Hepzibah House. It was made clear that it was a lockdown facility and that I wouldn't be leaving for a minimum of 15 months. That I wouldn't be able to speak to my parents, that they would come visit me once every 3 months. And as I was sitting there listening, they got to the point where they started talking about corporal punishment, and that they believed in using the rod of God. It was at this point I was done with it. I got up and I started trying to walk out, and I said, I'm not staying at this place. This is crazy. When I got to the door, there was like 20 locks all the way down the door, and I realized there was no way out. I was locked in. Ron Williams called all of his sons to try to grab me from trying to leave. They all grabbed me, and I was kicking and kind of flailing, and at that point I kicked out, and I think I hit Pastor Williams' wife. Ron Williams just lost it, and he just started screaming, to my dad, "You've raised a selfish, spoiled daughter, and you need to, you have to beat the devil out of her." I don't remember who, but somebody just started hitting me over and over on my back with this stick, and they were hitting me with this long stick and calling it the rod of God, and just whacking me with it, wailing me with it, all over my body. After a few minutes, they were able to subdue me, and they brought me into the room where my father was. They gave this rod of God to my dad. At that point, my dad took it, and he just spanked me on my butt with it. I forgot how many times. I think it was like 20 times he had to count, or something kooky like that. He was counting out how many times, and my dad was crying. And at that point, I was so exhausted from being hit over and over again from earlier that I just kind of laid there and took it at that point. They whisked me into the shower. I had to get rid of all my clothes from the outside world and go into the shower. And in the shower, I looked down, and I remember seeing all these marks, like these marks all over my entire body, from my shoulders down to my knees, that from where I had been whipped. In the 15 months I was locked up there, I went one time to the hospital when I had a really bad infection. I was taken to the emergency room once, where I was able to go in a car. While I was in the car, I was blindfolded when I went to the emergency room. I was blindfolded the whole time. They took the blindfolds off when I arrived at the hospital, and then when I left the hospital, I was blindfolded back to go back to Hepzibah House. Within the first few weeks that I was there, one of the most probably devastating things that happened, which really threw me, I was called into a room, and at that point there was a doctor, so they said he was a doctor, was there. And they told me at that point that I was going to have a physical exam to see if I'd ever had sex or not. I was petrified. I was 14 years old. I was very upset, and I told them I didn't want to do it, and I was crying, and I said, please don't do this. So they had the staff hold me down, physically held me down, as this strange man did a physical exam to see if I had had sex or not. And it was done in a closet on a table. Once we went to bed at night, we weren't allowed to get up. But some of the girls, thankfully not me, but some of the girls weren't able to go through the whole night without peeing. So they were forced to wear diapers. We would be in the main room and we could hear girls getting beaten, and you could hear the screams and the yelling. We were told to put our heads down on the table and be silent as we would listen to the girls screaming. It was horrific. My experience wasn't just my experience, but was the experience of many, many other girls. We'd all gone through this hell together. Us girls needed to come forward and tell our story. So in the hopes that other girls weren't sent to this school, we can't get them closed down, or we can't get other parents to be aware of them if we just go about our life and remain silent about what happened. It's important that we come forward and shatter the silence.